Hello, thank you for joining us for the webinar, Are You Financially Healthy? Brought to you by Virginia Credit Union. My name is Cherry Dale. I'm the Financial Education Director with Virginia Credit Union, and I'm so honored that you joined me today. I hope that this webinar is helpful. I know in the environment that we are in right now is just really chaotic when it comes to overall financial health. So now is a great time just to sit back and take an overall assessment of where you are with your finances. We're going to look at four specific areas when it comes to financial health, but ultimately, financial health does mean different things to different people. But for me personally, it's about being in control of my everyday, today transactions and not feeling panicked about it. I tell you what, so just to kind of give you a little bit about my background, I'm a mom. I work full time. I'm busy, and but I have these aha or oh no moments when it does come to finances, and I do this all the time. But I think it's ultimately about feeling that confidence and knowing that you've got it under control, whether you have a little bit in savings or a lot in savings. It's always really good to have a plan. So, um, having enough cushion in order to absorb a financial shock, we've seen now more than ever how important it is to have a savings cushion. Now, if you are starting off, or perhaps you are in financial crisis mode today, we will give you some basic tips through that. But again, the worst thing that we can do when it comes to our finances is just ignore it and hope it goes away, because it won't. It will just get worse. So analyzing the four areas that we're going to look at today, regardless if you're just starting out or perhaps you do have a cushion, is really important. It will help you stay on track to meet those personal financial goals. And really, if you're somebody about freedom and being able to go and do what you want, this can help you do that. Um, we're going to give you some knowledge of resources to help you with maintaining the four areas that we're hitting on, such as a balanced budget sheet, etc. And it will help you in your all of your areas, including short-term, long-term, and emergencies. So oftentimes, I think when it comes to financial health, there's a disconnect perhaps with the other areas of our life. But in reality, being financially healthy is really going to impact other areas of your life. It's going to help you physically and emotionally. And we all know what financial stress does to us. So being in control in this one area will help you with your overall mental well-being. So the four areas that we're going to concentrate on are spend, save, borrow, and plan. So, excuse me, sorry. If you can specifically look at these four areas and what's involved, but having a set kind of roadmap, financial roadmap when it comes to your spending habits, saving, understanding the borrowing implications, and then having a thorough plan is all part of developing a positive financial health for you and your family. One of the things that you can do is go to vacu.org/checkup, and it will walk you through and give you a financial health score. Overall, it's going to ask you, I think there are about 38 questions on the financial checkup, but it'll help gauge where you are with your overall finances. At the end of the checkup, it will then take you to a portal where you will have access to over 200 online financial education modules. And all of this information is out there for free for our members, and we hope that you will access it. The financial education modules have tons of great information in it. They have investing, budgeting, savings, college savings, all sorts of different topics in there for you to further investigate for your own financial health. So let's look at this area of spending. It's so easy to spend that money. And so this is where it's really important to have a plan. Um, most Americans, I'd say, get that paycheck, pay those initial bills, have a little bit maybe left over, and spend, spend, spend sporadically, perhaps, until their money is gone, without really thinking through. And I tell you what, when we're thinking about your financial health and peace of mind, when it comes to spending, you really need a spending plan or a budget. Um, what this will do, it will help guide your spending and help you know how much you should be allocating for certain pockets of your spending habits. So, for example, when it comes to housing expenses, you really should not be spending more than 35% of your net income on things like mortgage and rent, utilities, water, etc. So, really, and you're always basing these pockets off of your net income. We will give you access to a budget worksheet if you click on a link here. And that can help guide you in these specific areas of spending. And you can help yourself by creating a budget so you can know exactly how much you're spending it. And I tell you what, personally, I'm not a huge let's budget every single week or month, but I set a budget twice a year. And I usually do that around January, February, um, when I hopefully I'll get, maybe a tax refund. I'll also might get a raise if we're going to get raised, if we get, things like that, extra income. So I can allocate with that within my income, but then I can adjust my spending habits. And I tell you what, when we get extra income, the best thing we can do is make a plan around how you're going to spend that money. If you just got a recent economic stimulus check, and you haven't lost your job, if you've lost your job, that's a different story. You're going to take that stimulus money and apply it to your basic needs. And you're looking at housing first, food, etc., for your family, those basic family needs that you're going to take care of. But let's say you haven't lost your job and this might be a little bit of extra income. The worst thing you can do with that money is just leave it in there and then spend it down. I would encourage you to take a tax refund, the stimulus check money, any type of extra income, and make a plan around how you're going to spend that money. Put it into an allocated savings pot. At Virginia Credit Union, you can open up specific savings accounts for saving for specific things. So, for example, if you have a new car fund, you could open up a new car savings account, or perhaps you're good at just allocating that out in and of itself. There's this theory of the envelope method as well, where you can take some of that and put that into a quote virtual envelope or a physical envelope. But developing a plan about how you're spending it is really important. And that way it is out. Now, for me, my own personal situation, so I have a 2-year-old and I have an 18-year-old, and I also have a 22-year-old. Well, my 18-year-old is going to college in the fall. At least that's what we're anticipating. So I'm really socking away everything extra to help support him for that. And I know how much each year exactly I'm going to have to put toward his college tuition on average. And so, even though I've met that quota for this year, I'm thinking forward onto what does year 2 and 3 and 4 look like, and making sure I have cushion there. Um, so it's all about that pre-planning of what you're spending. Spend less than what is coming in and paying your bills on time in full. Now let's look at our next area of focus is saving. Saving is really important, and we can see it now more than ever how really very important it is for us to have a savings cushion. Experts would say you should put away 3 to 6 months of your living expenses and have that in an emergency fund. And With this economic crisis going on, we've seen now more than ever that people are living paycheck to paycheck. So this idea of starting to build an emergency savings fund is really, really important. Now, if you can't do 3 to 6 months worth of savings, I would definitely encourage you to just start with a small amount. You can look at $50, $100, $20, whatever that might be, but just make it automatic. That's the number one thing. If you can make savings automatic for you and your family, it's a much easier pill to digest, I do believe, at the end of the day. Ultimately, when we talk about savings, we talk about paying ourselves first. So this is when we're talking about making it automatic. So when you get that initial paycheck coming in, you're taking a percentage of that and automatically putting that into a savings account, into an IRA, into a 401k, where you don't even see it or have to think about it. 10% is a great number to aim toward. And I always get the question, well, does that include my 401k savings? And yes, it could include your 401k savings. So, if your employer does match what you're putting away into your 401k, that's really important because that will bump up that savings. But 401k savings is really long term. So when you're thinking savings, you can think short term, mid-term, and long term. And of course, in the short term savings, you're looking at that emergency fund and having a cushion that you can rely upon if a financial economic crisis were to happen to you and your family, or if those emergencies that do pop up. Mid savings might be more like for depending on how old your child is, uh, college tuition, or maybe you're saving for a car or something 2 to 3 years down the line where you're putting a money away for a specific financial goal. When you're thinking about savings, it's important to incorporate that back into your budget, which we originally talked about in the other slide. So it's simply another line item within your budget that you're putting away automatically. So now let's look at borrowing. Borrowing is really important. If in fact, you do get into a crisis mode, you do want to be able to have access to borrow money when needed, not only in crisis mode, but maybe thinking about buying homes. And quite honestly, the demand for home ownership, we haven't seen a huge decrease in that capacity at this point in time. Now, that might happen later, but people are still interested in buying homes, and most people don't have $200,000 laying around to purchase a house. So they need the ability to borrow funds from a financial institution. Ultimately, borrowing is about being able to access that loan money at a prime rate. And when we're thinking about a prime rate, that is always going to be, well, mostly going to be based upon your credit score. They're also going to be looking at income and assets as well as what they could look at. But breaking it down when it comes to your credit score, and then when we talk about credit, I do want to focus in on the FICO score because that is what most lenders use when determining whether or not to give you a loan. Your FICO credit score ranges from 300 to 850, and um, the higher the credit score, the better off that you're going to be. So, if you're in the 780 to 850, that's an excellent credit score. 300 to 580, it's going to be very difficult for you to even qualify for a loan. If you fall in the 580 to 640 range, you're going to want to really get that up when you're accessing credit. So fair, good, and excellent would give you pretty good access to credit overall, especially if you do have an income. Now, the higher the score, though, the lower the interest rate that you would receive as well, that you should receive. That's not always a given, but we would hope so. So, lenders look at credit kind of as a risk system. So you are less risky to a lender if you have a higher score. So what do lenders actually look at when comprising that credit score? What do the bureaus look at? So keep in mind when you develop a relationship with a creditor, they are reporting that relationship to the three bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. They take this information that is shown on the screen, they report that to the bureaus, and then the bureaus calculate and give you a score. Your score can be ever changing. And again, we just saw the range based upon what's on there, and what's being reported, and when it's being reported. But this is kind of the holistic view of it. Payment history is the number one thing. You absolutely want to make sure that your bills are paid on time because that will ding you the most when it comes to your credit score. You want to keep your balances low. 30% is a great ratio. So when we're talking about amounts owed, we're talking about debt, what you can borrow compared to what you have borrowed. So for example, on a credit card, if you can borrow $1,000 on your credit card and you've only borrowed $300, that would be a 30% ratio. So that's okay. That's a pretty good average on what you're borrowing. The more you borrow, if you max out that credit card, that will actually bring your score down because you are a little bit higher risk because you're using more of that accessible credit. Length of credit history is 15%. So if you are just starting out and have no credit, it takes at least 6 months to get into the system. And once you are, then you will get started. But you want to develop this length of credit history over time. 10% is new credit. So every time you apply for credit, that is actually a hit on your credit score. It'll bring it down just a little bit. So you want to keep the amount of inquiries on your credit at a minimum, and you want to space them out. So for example, if you are getting ready to purchase a house, you are not going to want to apply for a car loan right before you apply for your mortgage because the car loan would have already been a hit and then the mortgage would be another hit on your credit. So you want to keep those at a minimum. And then 10% is types of credit used. So they're looking at, do you have a car loan, a home loan, a mortgage, a student loan? What types of credit are you utilizing? So all of these different things give that credit score that we discussed. And the more on time you can pay your bills, the better off you're going to be. But do keep in mind, things are reported and stay on that credit report for 7 up to 10 years, depending on what it is. Now, the most recent derogatory things would have bigger implications than later things. Now, in today's climate, with the CARES Act, there are some new rules in place when it comes to credit reporting. So, for example, if you've gotten a loan extension on your loan, that is not going to be delinquent. That shouldn't be seen as delinquent. It's just, in other words, they would not report that as negative to the credit bureaus because they are extending that loan to you. Same thing goes with mortgages, student loans as well. So we're kind of in this unusual pocket of time. If you've worked with your creditor and they've made these exceptions for you, that it's not being reported to the credit bureaus. However, I will say you do want to be proactive when it comes to your credit and make sure that you are monitoring all of that as well. You can go to annualcreditreport.com and you can get a free weekly credit report from all three of the bureaus. That is something new as well. It used to be you could get your free credit report once a year from those three bureaus, but now because of the financial crisis, they are letting consumers have access to that weekly. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that if you are worried about your credit, or if you pushed through with some loan extensions or things like that, just to make sure that everyone's following the rules. So tips to improving your credit: you want to keep your balances low on your credit cards, pay off debt rather than moving it all around. If you close out a credit card account, it can actually put a ding or bring your score down just a little bit. So if you're looking to apply for, let's say, a mortgage or a car loan, you don't want to close out your credit cards accounts right now. However, if that's not in your immediate future, you're not getting a car, you're not getting a house, and you're worried about your credit card debt or using it, and the best long-term solution then might be for you to close that out for your overall strategy. It's really based upon what your goals are. And again, you don't want to open up a lot of new credit cards at one time. Those are just multiple hits on your credit report. So when you're thinking about getting out of debt, you want to make a list. And one of the ways you can do that is when you pull your credit report is going to have a list of all of your debts and your interest rate and who owns that debt. You want to make a list. You want to know how much interest you're being charged for each of your debt items. You want to know how much you owe overall as well. And then you plan a strategy. Which debt are you going to attack first? So if you have a high interest rate credit card versus, let's say, a home equity loan, you might want to attack the high interest rate credit card first because it's going to save you more money over time. However, if you just owe a small amount, let's say on a personal loan, and you want to just knock out that payment, it might be better for you to pay that first and then attack the high interest credit card. It's all about your strategy, and each strategy is going to be individual, but it's really important if you are taking on debt, you have a plan to pay that down, especially if you're looking at things like credit cards or unsecured debt. So now we'll focus in on planning. And I think it's so very, very important to have a financial plan and to have people alongside you to help you plan your overall financial journey. Hopefully you have insurance put in place, whether that's car or home insurance, but you also want to think through and plan ahead for what might happen to you if we're no longer here, especially if you were the breadwinner of the family. You want to make sure that you have plenty of insurance put in place to provide for your family if that were to happen. You also want to make sure that the beneficiaries on any type of 401k or IRA or insurance plan are very specific and put in place, and that they're up to date. If you, for example, have been married and then went through a divorce and got remarried, you want to look at those documents to make sure that whomever you have as the beneficiary, it is officially on those specific documents. If you're looking at a long-term financial plan for retirement, a financial planner is always a great idea to bring in to help you with investments for retirement and for your future. What they're going to do is assess your risk and figure out the best type of fund to put you in to ensure that your retirement needs are met. I personally am not a financial planner, but I do meet with my financial planner that helps allocate my retirement. I'm more like a financial coach, which will help people with other aspects. But I definitely appreciate my financial planner and the role that he plays to help me plan for my future. Virginia Credit Union also has other types of resources that can help you with your financial plan, which we will dig into at the end of this webinar. So ultimately, you are financially healthy. When you spend less money than you make, you have enough savings to cover 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, you can come up with 3,000 to cover emergency expenses. And you feel confident that you're on track to retire when you want to. It's about you being in control of your future when it comes to your finances. When we look at debt, you're paying no more than 30% of your monthly income towards outstanding debts. Your credit score is good, or you're actively taking steps to improve it. Your financial planning horizon is longer than a year, and your insurance policies are up to date and in place. So as I was referring to before, if here is the link to annualcreditreport.com where you can go and access those free credit reports. And you can do that weekly. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's not going, you do, if you want your score, you will have to pay for your score, but you can access your report and the information on there. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also has some great resources for consumers, and I would encourage you to check their website out as well. Virginia Credit Union cares about you and your family, and we do offer free financial one-on-one coaching through Balance. And this is a service that we partner with. So if you're a member, you can call this toll-free number and set up an appointment, and they can look into helping you create a financial plan for you and your family. You can also visit their website at www.balancepro.org. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. My email, again, because I know we went through that first slide quite quickly, is Cherry, Cherry, dot Dale, Dale, at vacu.org. Please, if you have questions, follow up with me via email, and I would be happy to help you in any way that I can. I wish you well on your financial journey. And, when we're looking at these 4 areas of spend, save, borrow, and plan, I encourage you to set up your plan to make your overall financial health a priority.